Yep.
Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. Hi, my name is Christina Lewis, and I'm the co-chair of the 4th Annual Black Arts Festival, along with Amanda Hillman. On behalf of the Kumba Singers and all our co-sponsors, the Office for the Arts, Learning from Performers, Showtime Films, Goldman Sachs, Urban World Films, the Kennedy School Black Caucus, the Harvard Foundation, the Harvard Black Students Association, the Harvard Entertainment Association, the Association for Black Radcliffe Women, the Harvard chapter of the NAACP, the Afro-American Studies Department, the Harvard Film Archive, and the Institute of Politics. We welcome you to the opening of the 4th Annual Black Arts Festival. Before we get started with our first event, the forum panel, I just wanted to tell you all a little bit about the history of the Black Arts Festival. The Black Arts Festival was started 4 years ago by a member of the Harvard Kumba Singers named Philip Gorff. The Kumba is an 80-person choir that is now 31 years old, whose mission statement is to celebrate Black creativity through song. And being an 80-person choir, they're the largest multicultural organization on the Harvard campus. The Black Arts Festival was founded in part to further the message of Kumba, but the founder admits that over the years it has become something bigger. Rather than expand on Black creativity just through song, the Black Arts Festival works to expand on Black creativity using performance and discussion. Hence our event today, a forum panel, which will be led by Professor Ingrid Monson. Professor Ingrid T. Monson is the author of Saying Something, Jazz Improvisation and Interaction, published by the University of Chicago Press, which won the Sonic Society's Irving Loewens Award for the best book published on American music in 1996. She is currently working on Freedom Sounds, Jazz, Civil Rights, and Africa, from 1950 to 1967, which will be published by Oxford University Press. And she will be joining the Harvard faculty as the Quincy Jones Professor of African American Music in the fall of 2001. Now, everyone, Professor Ingrid Monson.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the Black Arts Festival for inviting me to be here today. I think we're going to have a great discussion about a topic that's really important in African American music and culture, and that is the issue of the social responsibility of the artist and what that means and what it means in different art forms and at different times in history. And I can really think of no better framework for beginning to think about it than perhaps to mention Amiri Baraka's idea of the changing same. Certainly, if we look across the 20th century, just about every generation of African American artists has been very concerned with issues of social responsibility and broader relationship to the community and the struggle for racial justice. Nevertheless, each generation has answered the question of what the artist should do, what role the artist can play in very different ways. The artists at the time of World War II answered it in one way. Artists during the era of the Civil Rights Movement answered it in another way. And here today we have an opportunity to talk with several very exciting artists in their own rights about what their view of what that means today. And so I'd briefly like to introduce them, and then we can get underway. First, we're very honored to have cool DJ Red Alert here on my left. And he's recognized and respected worldwide as one of the founding fathers of hip-hop music and culture. He's received many awards, including a special award for the first annual Rap Hall of Fame Awards show and a Lifetime Achievement Award from Impact Music Trade publication in 1998. He's been cited as one of the 50 most influential people in the music by Rolling Stone magazine and was recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and has his own exhibit there. The only DJ so honored at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he has also appeared in over 50 music videos, and people are probably very aware of his role on the radio in New York. Sitting next to him is Mr. Oba Babatunde. Mr. Babatunde is perhaps most widely known for his Tony-nominated portrayal of C.C. White in the original Broadway production of Dreamgirls, and his performance in Hal Prince's award-winning Broadway musical entitled Grind. He also received critical acclaim for his portrayal of jazz artist Jelly Roll Morton in George C. Wolfe's world premiere of Jelly's Last Jam that opened in Los Angeles. He's been a star in a number of feature films, including The Visit, Life, Introducing Dorothy Dandridge, and Miss Evers' Boys. And sitting next to him is Miss... And sitting next to him is Mr. Jordan Walker Perlman, who is the director of the feature film The Visit, which received a special recognition to the National Board of Review. And I believe that's scheduled for us to see during the festival, right? He was also nominated for the Best First Feature and Best First Screenplay by the Independent Feature Project. He is founder of Dawa Movies, an independent production company with offices in Los Angeles and New York. So welcome to all our guests. And I think maybe we could start by perhaps having each of you give your own view of what you think the socially responsible artist in the year 2001 ought to be doing,
I start like.
If you want to, you don't have to.
I think, and I could be wrong on behalf of the rest of the gentlemen, that I feel that before we look at about being responsible for our audience, I think we was looking upon our field of entertainment. We wanted to showcase and present our talent to the massive to show them what we are capable of doing. At the same token of time, we did not know how people would gravitate to you, not only within upon what you do, but how they look at you. So that's where that come in later on. And I think that go according to, I know I'm a parent, so as I know my son, same time before my son, within my nephews and my cousins, how they looked at me for what I was doing. They took it in a different standard than me just being an entertainer. They looked at me as like saying, hey, my uncle, my father, my cousin, he's doing something and I love what he's doing. So definitely enhanced me to keep going in that role and show the right direction.
You had mentioned earlier that somehow that this topic may have been addressed differently through the passage of time. I'm not absolutely sure that I would agree with that 100%. My life experience has taught me that history does repeat itself. In dealing with the issues of Black America and the situation that we have been presented in terms of the historical aspect of our lives, we've been forced to deal with issues in a particular fashion because of the playing field that has been set forth. I would dare to say that the intent has always been the same, and that is to represent ourselves as positively as we possibly could. The expression might vary, but I think the intent has always been the same. In terms of the responsibility, I can speak as an artist for myself and saying that I accept full responsibility for the images that I present and portray, because I understand the power of the media. If anyone has ever seen the movie Tarzan, I will use that as an example. Tarzan, as one film, gave a false representation of who a people were, thereby getting Africans not really wanting to be associated as Africans through that representation. whites, and I'm using obviously broad strokes here. I'm not singling anybody or any individual, any race out, but in terms of broad strokes for the sake of the conversation, discussion. Whites believing that, or anybody not having exposure to what Africa was, believing that the people, the indigenous people of that land, were somehow unable to communicate with each other, let alone the animals there, that a person of white skin who spoke no language with the exception of could communicate with all of the animals and get them to do whatever it is they wanted. It made African Americans not want to be associated with being Africans, of which their heritage and their roots stem. That's one film. Using that as a barometer, I understand the power of the media. I understand the power of how that sets forth what generations will be perceived as, what individuals will be perceived as, and in doing so, how we will communicate with one another. So, having said that, I take full responsibility for the images that I portray. And we stand on the shoulders of those that come before us. I believe that as well to be fact. And so I have a responsibility, not only to my self-expression, but to those and the struggle that they have laid down prior to my coming into the situation, for which they opened the door for me to interact in, to uphold and sustain that which they have ultimately, in some cases, literally given their lives for. Without going on too much longer, because I'll function best in the question and answer, because then I can address what your questions are. But if we go back to artists like Robeson and the artists of that era who had to leave this country in order to express themselves creatively, and to have themselves be recognized as viable artists in their artistry, it changes the scope of how we then have to look at artists, African American artists in America. You cannot just look at them from the standpoint that they sprung up one day and were there entertaining. Whether we choose to or not, we are launched into a position that is somehow related to a political struggle. You know, you mentioned Amiri Baraka. That form of entertainment of that era was born out of a struggle that was going on at that time. I think as we look at and DJ would be more apt to speak on this than myself, but as we look at the rap artists today, they're expressing an issue or issues that are actually going on in their lives, in their communities. I'm doing a film right now with two gentlemen. The name of the movie is How High. It's a Universal picture, and it's Redman and Method Man are the stars of the movie. And funny enough, it takes place at Harvard. I play the dean of freshmen. And I'm a very staunch, rather uptight, anal individual who has a problem with the fact that these two guys have been admitted into the school because the Board of Trustees has decided they need more ethnicity in the school. And so while it is a broad comedy, there are many of the social issues that are addressed. But I say that to say the fact that in getting to spend time with these two gentlemen, I've learned and been exposed to the fact that imagery, from what one might get from how they present themselves as artists and who they are as individuals when you sit and talk with them, totally diverse. Not so far removed from the music because it's in their truth. But it doesn't mean that every time they speak to you as they would if they were performing their music. So there is artistic expression and there is who we are as a people. Now, because of the situation that we've been placed in, many times they cross, they merge, they interact, they intermingle. But that is not the total sum of who the individual is. And I'll stop talking until the Q&A because I'll go on forever.
Oh. I was initially a little confused by the question. Only in this sense, because there could be two contexts to it. One is, how responsible are artists, social responsibility? Well, I thought, did you mean as an individual, as they try to put on athletes? Well, you're not supposed to do that, you're a role model. So should an individual artist be responsible? And in that sense, you know, I think it's very, very troublesome for artists to speak for other artists, just like individuals, just like human beings. You speak for yourself. I do think what Oba said is so important, that artists should be accountable for their art. Whether that is something that's judged as being socially responsible, whether that's something that's judged as being uplifting or downlifting, you don't do it, put yourself out there, and then say it wasn't me. The other context, which is what it seems to be and what we're talking about, is the images that you create and your responsibility in creating those images, especially as it relates to your life experience and the community. And there's a trap. There's a trip to it, which is art's supposed to be free. You might not get rich doing it, you probably won't. You might be happy doing it, you might be unhappy doing it, you might think you're happy doing it and it tortures your soul so much that you're not as happy as you thought you were. Your family might be upset that you're doing it, they might be, you don't know. But the one thing that we know about art is it's supposed to be free. Your music's supposed to be free. Your images are supposed to be free. Your acting is supposed to be free. That's the definition of art. You're free to do what you want. Those were the only rules throughout history that we've been told that art was. Express yourself. Whatever you're feeling, express yourself. That's the accepted global map of art. And that's true, and it's fundamental, and it's beautiful. However, as it relates to my art, to movies, the images that are available of the African American community, the roles that are available to artists like Oba and others of my friends, are limited to images that are neither uplifting or socially responsible if it's not within the control of the artist. When it does become in the realm of the control of the artist, there is something to be said is the world is too narrow, the images that are out there are too narrow. Do something uplifting. Do something positive. I believe that. I don't think at this point in my life I could make a movie that didn't have in its entirety the desire to uplift the soul of the audience and entertain them as well. But if you accept that, that's the trap. Because if you accept that, you're saying, well, art is this is our global definition of art, do what you want, be free, but you don't have access to those same rules because you have to carry this extra burden of responsibility for the images that you create. It can't just be you as an artist. You have to be an artist speaking for a community and responsible to community for those images, and you have to provide the community those images. So it's a trap. I mean, I don't pretend to know my way out of the trap, but it's something that constantly comes up. You have to carry a double load, and both are valid in their own way.
Well, certainly everybody has spoken very eloquently to a lot of issues, and I heard a couple of themes that we might want to explore more in depth. One, Mr. Babatunde, you raised the issue of the relationship to heritage and Africa in particular. And it might be interesting to hear more from you about the way you've worked with that, because I know that's been a very important part of your work. And what you just said about the kind of double bind that the artist finds themselves in, where art is supposed to be free, but we live in a society that isn't free and that is very racially stratified. And one of the issues, I think, is that sometimes African American artists are held to be especially accountable to community in a way that a lot of white artists really aren't, where where really there's more of a freedom to be held responsible as an individual. And it seems to me that we got to figure out how to get some social responsibility into some non-African American artists as well. And DJ Red Alert, we'd love to hear more about your experiences also in trying to practice your art and the kinds of maybe dilemmas you run up against in terms of free expression, or then hitting your head against a wall against some of the structures that exist out there.
I think we've been fortunate for me that during my time I've been doing the radio as well as the clubs, that regardless of what the form of music has been, when people take time to look at me individually and see how I carry and conduct myself to the audience, I let them know that what I'm doing, just like this gentleman just stated about Redman and Method Man, is entertainment. Now, when I'm away from the turntables and people talk to me one-on-one, and they get the different perception about me compared to what they hear me play on the radio or hear me play in the clubs. And that's where I know that people would take to you differently, because the problem had been throughout the years, as we know in the hip-hop society, that the problems, the issues. So everybody look at all the rap artists or the DJs, anybody in the hip-hop era, we all the same. And that's hard to get away from there. But at the same token of time, when people see how you present yourself, they think differently of you. And I know that I myself individually spend time with a lot of youths, where if you spend time listening to me on the radio, I'm gonna spend time coming to your school. I go to rehabilitation centers, go to the facilities where you're held in because you did wrong. And I talk one-on-one to them. Now, within that bunch that I talk to, if I can get 2 out of that bunch to relate and understand in which direction to go, I know I'm on the right track with them. But at the same token of time, as I remember in the past when I was growing up, when you look at TV and you were seeing all the drama, the violence, it was entertainment. It wasn't taken for you to go and do the same as you see on TV. And that's the same way I try to show them that what you hear me play on the radio or in the clubs, if it don't have to deal with violence, it may be within other issues, that don't mean for you to go and do the same thing. After you enjoy that, you put your frame of mind and saying, listen here, I enjoy what I just heard and what I just saw, but then again, I still look at him as he's a gentleman that just pleased me and make me enjoy it, but then again, he's on the right track where he's catering to us and letting us feel pleased with what he's presenting. Many times that, as this gentleman said, we get caught up of mad little things that come about. And them little things, it's like saying you took years and years to build up your statue and what you are. 5 minutes of one little destruction erased everything you took years of building up. And it's sad because the media will take and lean that on you. And not only as you individual, but as a collective. So you're fighting against the channels. It's just like saying, here it is, I myself, I have not spent time going to college. I have spent time going to school and graduated out of high school. I have not become articulate like the rest of the people, and I respect to every one of the students that's in here to go forth with their life. But as an individual, and I'm proud to say, as I was raised under my grandparents, I do know how to conduct myself to people. And when you conduct yourself to people, regardless of your school background or your career, but as a human being, that's what I feel is more important than within everything else. Everything else will come in play. But how you conduct yourself to an individual, that's what really matters.
Well, I'd like to introduce Mr. Stacy Spikes, who has just arrived. He had a delayed airport experience, okay, which is not uncommon. Mr. Spikes is founder and CEO of the newly formed Urban World Films, an independently financed black film distribution company based in New York City. Mr. Spikes previously held marketing positions with Miramax Films, where he assisted in the marketing campaigns of films like Trainspotting, Don't Be a Menace, and the teenage horror film Scream, and we're very happy to have him here today, and so let's welcome him. You've kind of joined us mid-conversation. We're talking about a lot of issues. I'm sure that you have many things to say, but we'd like to hear your perspective on the various kinds of dilemmas facing an African-American artist, and what kinds of ideas you have about about social responsibility, about political awareness, about giving back to the community. And these.
You know, it's really funny because last week I was in a cab coming to work, and the cab driver said to me, "I don't mean to offend you, but can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." And, you know, I go to work, jeans, t-shirt, and a baseball cap turned on backwards, and that's how I go to work every day. And he said, "How is your race gonna survive?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, and I don't know his nationality, but he had his newspaper, and I couldn't read it, but he was reading an article from me, because we were, you know, you never move in New York. And he said, 1/3 of all your black men are incarcerated, less than 10% go to college, and your high school dropout rates, your pregnancy rates, and your killing yourselves and your violent rates. And he goes through this whole thing, and the article was based on the state of Texas and the incarceration rate and the murder rate. Now, I'm from Texas, and I said to him, I said, well, here's something that's a little different. If you do not have the money, you will not get, it's not about justice, it's about how much money you have to defend yourself. If you don't have the money to defend yourself, often you're given public defenders, and strangely enough, in our movie, The Visit, that's exactly what happens to the main character. I'm sure most of you guys have heard about the 14-year-old kid who got sentenced to life for imitating wrestling. If he had good lawyers and the money, he wouldn't have ended up there. So there are certain factors that do happen in society where for a long time we have been the people that it's easy to blame them. Our president has openly admitted to using cocaine. Well, he should be in prison too, with a lot of people. And so if that's the case, and so you quickly find out it's not necessarily about black or white, it's about money and having the ability to defend yourself. So I was a kid, just like many other people are a kid, and I think that youth we all do things we're not supposed to do, okay? That's just part of it. That's part of growing up. And sometimes, you know, my days, it was someone brought a knife to school, and today it's someone brings a gun to school, and in my dad's days, it was someone brought brass knuckles to school. So it all kind of changes a little bit, but the penalty at which they will incarcerate us, lock us away, and throw away the key is much faster now than ever before. And when Jordan brought this movie to us and we saw it, there's another film which I just saw 2 days ago that someone brought to us about prison life, which will remain nameless, which I wouldn't even think about releasing, because it kind of glorified this manhood of I'm gonna shank them before they're gonna shank me, because we live in the jungle and this is how it is, and that's why we're all here, and I gotta do what I gotta do to survive. It doesn't talk about any of the way the people that are there got there, okay? But Jordan's movie dealt with this person who knew he was wrong. It's very similar to Hurricane in a way, where you have this person dealing with that. And so when you see a movie that's trying to solve a problem, this guy accepts, I'm going to die, I will not get out. How can I change my life from a spiritual sense on the inside, even if I'm not free from these bars? And Maya Angelou talks about, I know why the caged bird sings. It's not out there, it's right here, you know, and what do we do to make a difference in that? And that's the thing that I think media sometimes, okay, give me a prison story. But give me black people in prison, but are you going to give me a bigger spiritual sense of why they're there and the purpose of them being there, and there's something behind it other than gratuitous violence? Shawshank, he says, and Morgan Freeman says, now, sometimes he fought against the sisters and sometimes he lost, but prison's no fairy tale. And that movie was about redemption and about overcoming that. And so I think sometimes you appreciate a movie like that because we all end up in circumstances that we have to figure out what to do to change those circumstances, even though we may not physically get out of them. So.
Well, I think everybody has made, really wonderful points, and I'm sure a lot of people, that everyone would like to have a chance to answer their questions. But before we go to questions, I just want to find out if any one of you would like to say something more before we open it up to questions. Well, in that case, why don't we take some questions from people who are here? I'm sure you have many. Brother Blue?
I'll make it very brief. First, thanks. This is great. And what I want to say, I'll make it real short. Since I don't know all your names, I don't have to pay for this company, my brothers and my sister. But one short thing. You guys are great. But what I want to get to, though, is the mix, the ensemble. It's past human cunning, the representation. This woman, this sister right here, the first time I heard her give, I go to I love the thing, and I went to see then in a paper, this sister right here, on the black artist jazz and the social conditions. When she started, I was thinking, what does this woman know? What is she about? And she finished her thing, and I discovered I followed her up in her idea. She's so soulful, she's so true. Past the accent of birth. It's for all of you. I'm hurrying through here. First, your elegance. Man is elegant. The way you presented the whole style. You see this butterfly here. See, this body is the chrysalis, a cocoon. Inside of us, there's something past the externals. And just this ensemble, the enormity of the event, wrapped in different skins and different cocoons of these people thinking in their own beautiful way. And you, so real. I just love your real, you just look these dynamite. This brother here expressing something like this ensemble, this orchestration is so great. I think only the great musician or poet brought it together. So I want to thank all of you because looking from the outside, you don't know what's going on here. So you're all beautiful. And this is the idea of jazz, of African American life, and I thank you. I think of you as angels to open up our minds and hearts to what is to be a human being, transcending the accident of your birth, or gender, or generation.
Any other tough questions?
Yeah. You're really putting us on the spot there. Would you like to answer a question?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
I'm Kamala Salmon. I'm a sophomore here. My question is this. When we talk about social responsibility, one of the first things that comes to my mind is hip-hop and hip-hop culture. That's one of the main things that I thought about as I was formulating this question in terms of like the way African Americans portray themselves and are portrayed in the hip-hop culture. And I'm just wondering, how do you guys respond to this question of whether it's something that's just entertainment and should just be pushed to the side, but when there's something that's very real happening in society where people are internalizing it, even though maybe it should be just entertainment, people are internalizing and acting thereon, and what should the artists then do, recognizing that people are in fact internalizing and emulating?
You know, the sad part had been, because a lot of people know that I'm one of the beginners in the hip-hop culture, and our everyday livelihood, I was just stating this to a gentleman and to my assistant that's here with me from my management company, that when we were doing our everyday livelihood, our way of expression, the way we wear our clothes, the lingo and everything, we had no idea that this was going to become a culture. We was just interacting with each other, and I think that's like that in any other inner city area across the country. It just so happened that certain sound was created in the Bronx, so they took and enhanced that culture along with that sound. And when they was hearing who we was calling at the time the MCs, reciting certain verbal things as rhyming, And all the time they kept on saying that certain term, to the hip, to the hop, the hip, hip, hip. The media took what they heard and placed that title up there, hip hop. We never ever said that we was hip hop from the very beginning. We used to say we going to the jams, we go rock in the block parties. When our parents heard us performing this music, and I know that they could remember what the parents used to say, y'all listen to that bebop stuff. There was no title hip hop. So what had happened, they put that title on, and then they start to enhance about the inner city youth. That it changed from one to another, and then when the music started to create greater and greater, it took people to have a chance to express their livelihood. What's sad to say, but then again, our livelihood that where we are in New York was far different than livelihood was taking place in Los Angeles when the gangs was going on. So when the hip hop music got to the West Coast, they only go recite how they live, gang banging. Once again, the same time that came out, here a movie called Colors came out. That embraced both together, and then it came back across the country. Oh, that's the new happening. It's all about the gang banging. The media exploit that, and everybody feel well, that's what to do. Meanwhile, you don't know individually how them people feel about themselves. They're only expressing how they live and what they know. But the media took it across, and before you know it, it caught everybody's attention, and they feel it had to be a bandwagon situation. Now, there have been a lot of Afrocentric messages. There have been a lot of novelty, a lot of dance, and that go to show you the diversity of hip-hop culture. Just like I was saying earlier to somebody, I was saying, if you take time, you listen to a Jay-Z, you listen to a Channel Live, and you listen to a Will Smith. Now, I just mentioned two different entities of hip-hop. Still hip-hop. It's just that's the way their livelihoods all take place. Now, the people as individuals, if they want to entertain, that's one thing. If they want to live that way, they got to take responsibility according to what they saying and how they living. Now, it's up to, within number one, their parents to let you know what you're listening on radio and what you see in the videos doesn't mean for you to go and do the same thing. They entertaining you. So keep that in mind. It starts at home.
And you could also listen to a Jay-Z album and hear 6 different messages on 6 different tracks. And it's always interesting what the record companies choose to release and who they're appealing to when they choose to release it, and what assumptions they're making when they choose that track. There's a beautiful piece on Jay-Z's last album. It's beautiful. It's opera. I don't think the record company is going to release it. And I think that there's a strategy there. And I think at its core, I mean, rap is like any other art. And like Red said, it's got its different messages. It's got its good and it's got its bad. I think essentially it's like anything else, art and entertainment. When we talk about the question that you asked, I think if we're going to really talk about that, then the debate has to be larger, like this debate is, because I think there's an unfair pattern where it's always put upon the African American community to start that debate. And I thought it was very interesting, and this is my last angry point for a few minutes, I think. I thought it was very interesting that when a horrible tragedy happened at the school, was it 2 weeks ago? It was horrible. I was at a dinner table with friends, and it struck us all that unfortunately the shooter was Caucasian. No one mentioned it. No one talked about the music. No one talked about the epidemic of white teenage boys shooting 30 or 40 other teenage boys at a time. And I remember when something happened in my grandmother's neighborhood about 8 years ago, I was over at her house for dinner, and as a shooting happened, and the news played hip hop, totally unrelated. They didn't find this album in the kid's bedroom. They were just trying to create entertainment. And that's scary to me. And the entertainment that rap artists are creating does not scare me half as much as the entertainment that news media outlets are creating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think
Can I-
you were next, and then we'll try to go back and forth between the
Can I
microphones.
just make
Okay,
one more
sure.
comment on that? I think also what we've got an opportunity to be privileged to hear today is the evolution of this music. I think it's phenomenal, and I think it should be paid a little bit of attention to the fact that this is called a culture. A culture.
Right.
A musical art form. I don't know if that's ever happened in history. I mean, that a musical art form could give birth to a culture, meaning that it is a lifestyle by which people begin to represent themselves in life. I can tell you that that speaks to a power. I think another thing that we're hearing is, we keep coming up, the media. I think it was very interesting the way it was represented, that the media, well, who is the media? And how do we then, if we are unhappy with this syndrome, how do then we interact with this media to alter and change what we are essentially being fed and brainwashed to believe? I think that's an issue that we all should think about. Who is this media? Because ultimately, I talked about the fact of my sense of responsibility, because I know how that which we represent in terms of imagery plays on the individual's minds. Red and Jordan have expressed, and it's brought it back to how the media has taken a terminology out of a lyric, hip-hop, and labeled the music, and Jordan talked about how the media will release what they will release in order to represent the imagery that they want. So who is the media, and how do we then, if we're being manipulated by this media, how do we deal with that monster, if you will, and say, listen, I don't want to be brainwashed by this. I demand that another art form expression or an alternative look at this be represented and fed to me as well. Because, you know, they say, this is important, this is important, this is important, this is important, this is important. Now, the brain does not really discern between reality and fantasy. You just keep putting it in front of it, it accepts it as reality. And then they go, that's not important, this is what's important, this is what's important, this is what's important, this is what... Before you know it, that is what becomes important. This is what is truth, this is what is truth, this is what is truth. Before you know it. If every child grows up from the point that they're able to watch a television, and every single night when the news is on and they see someone in handcuffs with their head down and it looks like one of you, whether you're black, white, or whatever your race origin is, you will begin to have you will formulate a particular opinion, a viewpoint about someone that looks like that, whether you choose to not, even if it looks like yourself. So that when you get into an elevator, right, you guys may have heard this funny story, a quick anecdote, that two gentlemen were on an elevator, and there was a woman from the Midwest, Caucasian, who had been in Las Vegas and was very excited about having just won 2 buckets of quarters, and told her husband, I'm going to take them upstairs to the room. And as she got into the elevator, the elevator door opened, and there were two African-American men standing on the elevator, and she initially hesitated before getting on the elevator and then decided, I'll just go. She got on the elevator and turned around very quickly, and one gentleman said, hit the floor. And she fell on the floor and threw the coins on the floor, to which they started laughing because they were saying, hit the floor that you're going to. Okay, the 2 gentlemen helped her pick her coins up and put them back in the bucket, and she went to her, they actually walked her to her room, and the next day she received 2 dozen roses from these gentlemen, and it said, thanks for the best laugh we've had in a very long time, Michael Jordan and Eddie Murphy. The images, two very prominent individuals, figures that didn't see that, saw the imagery and was nervous, hit the floor. So think about that.
The perception.
Perception. Do you want to say, could everyone say their name when they ask their question?
Richard Phillips,
Okay.
Harvard Senior. This sort of relates to the point you made about strategic, I guess, releasing of records. And I guess when the artists frame the constraints on their art, it was put in a sort of a moral light, like we recognize that there are these perceptions out there and I have to present myself in a positive way, and that sort of being the constraint on your art. But I was wondering if any of you maybe recognize, have experience with, or care to expand on more of the, economic, structural constraints, which, a scary point to be made, I guess, is that that's somehow related, that these images make money and in turn put a pressure on you to propagate them in like a very real sort of financial, structural sort of way. And I was wondering if either of you have experience with that or care to speak about it.
I can talk a little from both the music industry as a distributor. We're in the business of buying and selling, and so we have to choose what you're going to buy and what you're going to try and sell. As companies are, we're probably all wearing a lot of different brands here, and companies are brands too, and you start to distinctly, if I say Def Jam, or I say Interscope, or I say Death Row, or I say Disney, they're very distinct brands, and maybe one person of each of those brands in the room would buy those brands, but a company tries to find its niche in the market and finds a consumer. So you see rises in certain things, and people choose what they want to do, and it often starts from who's running the company or who's at the top. And you do find people that give me the easiest, softer way, let me get in and let me get in there fast. And the downside in that business model is you can go up really fast, but you may fall really fast. It's the same thing that we used to say in the music industry. Being a #1 artist on MTV is really good because it's now the biggest radio station in the world, but also once they're done with you, it's really hard to come back. And when you are that big, it's very hard to have a career, where a lot of artists that are trying to have sustained careers are not doing music videos now. They're going and they're performing back at clubs again. They're doing local things, and they're not doing that. And you do have groups that companies try and break in, and the way they're going to have to do it is they have to get with sensationalism. I don't think any of that's new. I think even when Jack the Ripper was slicing throats, the newspapers loved that. That's as long as there's people who can make money off of sensationalism, that'll exist. But there's a wisdom that's starting to come in the consumer, because you know what? When we talk about, Oba said a really great thing. Who's the media? You know what? Who the media is? We're the media. And you know why we're the media? If you turn it on and you look at it and you buy it, we'll make it. Somebody will give it to you. And how do we determine what we're going to sell and what we're going to do a lot of times? Focus groups, market trends. Oh, there's a boy band, let's make another boy band. And that's how the entertainment industry and the media sits back and it watches for pulses of things that we do as consumers. And the minute one starts running, the minute you see an Entertainment Tonight, then here's an Extra, here's an Access Hollywood, and I got to get more and more tabloid-like. Still, the tabloids sell more than all the other things when you come up to the newsstand combined, when you're checking out at the grocery line. Why are they there? We buy it. And so when we look at someone's life being invaded and something that happens like that, we have to look at us as a consumer. And I'll never forget where somebody had a quote that says, This lady said, I feel like I helped kill Princess Di because I used to buy all of the tabloids too. I always wanted to see what was going on in her life. We like to sit back as a consumer and pretend that we don't have anything to do with that, you know? For hip hop albums to go #1 at the charts, we like to pretend we aren't buying them, you know? But somebody's buying them. It's like the cousin that's crazy and lives in a nut house. Somebody's got cousins that live in nut houses, but no one wants to admit it. So I think a lot of times we have to take responsibility in our own actions. Do I turn on the TV? Do I watch it? They have Nielsen boxes to determine what we watch. They can tell by every credit card receipt what we buy. We do that for a reason. So, there.
Okay, thank you. We've got a lot of people who want to ask questions. I'm going to ask all the panelists to try to keep our responses such that as many people can ask questions as we can fit into our time. I think we're on this mic next. Yes.
Perhaps to expedite that, if you can pose your question to one of us, then each individual will sort of address it, and then we all won't jump in because we'll all want to talk.
Right, and everybody has such great things to say. It's terrible to limit.
I'm Taya Johnson. I'm a sophomore at Harvard, and maybe I'll pose this to Cool DJ Red Alert. I was actually a lot of the subjects you were talking about actually made me think right now of the situation that Sean Puffy Combs is in, and I was just sort of wondering actually what you thought of that situation, if you thought that it was, I mean, he's a man so in the public eye that even my mother, who's completely disconnected from pop culture, knows what's happening today with Puffy, and if you thought that he was going to have, what his effects were on successful African Americans, and if you think they're negative, do you blame Puffy, or you've been talking a lot about the media, do you blame the media? So kind of what you thought about him, because he's just so out there.
I can't take sides for neither one, but as an individual such as Puffy, we go erase away from hip hop, from talking about being a celebrity, we talk about now an individual that got caught out there with some trouble, and he have to learn to deal and see whatever comes at him. I wish the best for him, but now when you have, as a celebrity, hip-hop, once again, media, money, all that taking place. The sad part about it, the media builds on it, and what this gentleman at the end say, we feed into it, and before you know it, everybody talking back and forth. You never heard that old record by Houdini called Big Mouth? In that record, Big Mouth, when he said by the time it got all the way around to the person, the whole thing been changed around. So that's what it is. It's like it's going in a circle about what is it place about him. Yes, he is a great person as an individual. He's a great entertainer. He's a good businessman. But he was at the wrong place, at the wrong time, and he has to suffer through this crisis right now. But with all the press and everything around it, they're building up so much on it because they know they can receive off of this. At the same token of time, the people who, quote unquote, suing this gentleman, see what they can receive off of this. So it's sad. I wish all the best to him. But I wish they would not look at it as just as part of the hip hop culture, because violence and crime touch every culture around the world, not just at one. It's because hip hop had became a big standout thing over the years, and everybody pinpoint about certain issues that took place. But before that, rock and roll went through the same thing. Country western went through the same thing. All other different genres of music went through the same thing. It's just that hip hop music is in the forefront. So they shooting the owl.
Thank you. Dan?
Hi, my name is Vaishali Juglikar. I'm not a Harvard student. I work at the American Anti-Slavery Group, though we had a forum at Harvard a couple months ago. My question's actually directed to Stacy. Stacy, you alluded to this a little bit of a while ago. I want to come back to it again. You stated something about how the international market now is really becoming very American-focused. I mean, Jesus, CNN, NTV, it's everywhere. I can go to Germany, I can go to Kenya, my home country, India. Puff Daddy's everywhere, Jay-Z is everywhere, Snoop Dogg is everywhere. And I think it's really scary that we have a crunch coming on where it's not just the American media, showcasing whomever to the American audience. It is now fast transacting overseas, and it might be that, yes, I am a person who's a U.S. consumer, and I love Snoop Dogg, I do, so I buy his CDs. I don't like Jay-Z, but I like Snoop Dogg. I'll buy them. However, I'm immersed in this culture. I somewhat have an idea of what's going on. My cousins in India, they want to be American. And so they think, from looking at MTV or whatever's going out there, that that is the immediate cool thing to do. And they're buying a lot of stuff and thinking that this is American culture by the droves. Another thing that's happening, and then I'll sit down, is that parents are now starting to get very fidgety about it too. I wrote an article in The Economist where Japanese parents are getting concerned that on the one hand, they don't like rap artists for whatever reason, and then they love Lawrence Fishburne, they love Denzel Washington because he seems to portray something else. So I was wondering if you could actually give us some comments about what you think about how pervasive this thing is and if we're in danger or not.
Good one. As far as worldwide industries, American entertainment makes more money than anything on earth. Second behind that is arms. And third behind that is tobacco and drugs. So the powers that be want to maintain the power. And the internet is about to make all of that get even smaller. In the deals that we're working on with movies now, you'll see how before the internet, we would negotiate a deal that would say a movie's going to go in theaters, then it's going to go to cable, then it's going to go to pay-per-view, then it's going to go to video, blah, 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 right? Now what's happening is each one of those previous windows are taking worldwide internet rights at that time. So let's say you went into theaters. Now already, you're going to start to see, I think in the next 5 years, HBO, AOL TV's coming out, and Microsoft has the Xbox. You don't no longer have a US premiere and then it comes out foreign. You will have worldwide premieres that will happen. You only have 4 distribution companies in the world for entertainment, and they dominate. And the way they've structured laws, even like in France has laws that they only want so much music that's French music and so much television that's French television. They let the French company own 51% of that company, which then makes it a French company. You sell the assets to that company, so you give them the movie, and then it's considered a French property. So that's how you circumvent the laws. It's going to get far worse, and we happen to be the leaders. Do you guys remember not too long ago how independent films were really big, how foreign language films were big, and how Miramax kind of came along in these new markets of foreign language films, almost reared their head, and then they completely fell down again. Now, French companies no longer make French language movies. They make English language, but they'll shoot part in France and part in America. All of the German companies help back DreamWorks. Taiwanese companies are into DreamWorks. Everyone's saying, I'm just going to put my money in there, and English language has become the dominant. I don't know how that's going to change. I can only see it getting worse. But for those of us who may portray positive messages, it could be a good thing, you know? So.
Thank you.
My name is Jessica Berwick. I'm a first year at Harvard, and I've wanted to ask somebody this question for a long time, but I'm not really sure who to direct it to, so maybe whoever really wants to respond. What do you guys think about Eminem? I mean, not just Eminem, but more broadly, someone who talks not just explicitly about violence, the everyday media violence, but hatred in a way that's really kind of overwhelming and certainly hurtful to a huge portion of our population. So what do you say to an artist who is maybe trying to be inflammatory, maybe trying to express his own views, but is inevitably creating some kind of backlash Is he allowed to do that? Should he not? Should he restrict himself, or
He
what do you
has
think?
to be allowed to do it. I mean, as an individual, but also as an artist, I'm scared when they start telling you what you can and can't say. Because there's a lot of people, I can guarantee you, there's not a lot of that in my movie. I didn't put any in there. But there's a lot in my movie that people weren't pleased with, and a lot of people didn't want me to make the visit. And there's a lot of people who didn't want the visit to come out. And there's a lot of times you can be offended, as an artist, you can be offended by somebody's work, personally and as an artist, and still support their right to express themselves. Because if you start creating the commotion to shut the door on them, you're going to look behind yourself and the door is going to be shutting down on you, and somebody else is going to be yelling about what you're doing. That's a reaction as an artist. I don't know. If I were a parent, I'd probably have a different answer, but I'm not yet. So
I say that the gentleman is going to speak his mind, and the audience that like it is going to feed into it and buy it. The company see how much the response is, and what they're going to do. Rotate it around, keep marketing and promoting for the audience to become greater and greater and greater. And we all know that before Eminem, it was somebody else that was very foul with the mouth too. So it's going to be somebody after him too. But like this gentleman say, freedom of speech. If somebody have a chance to express out what they say, and you have a company behind them to support and market and promote them, and the audience is there to buy his product, it's going to keep going. You can't stop it. There's no traffic when it comes to that.
Hi, my name is Henry Colbert. I'd like to address my question to any one of the gentlemen who would like to answer. One of the things I like about hip-hop, particularly this generation of hip-hop, is the entrepreneurial spirit that it has embedded in it. And it's something that we don't talk about. We talk about, oh, somebody's talking about shooting somebody, but Master P has a company. Bad Boy has a company. And so and these guys are also moving into other industries. It's an economics lesson to me. And I'm wondering, and this is something that's quite different, I believe, from the jazz and the blues history. You got a bunch of black guys who are standing up and saying, yeah, I'm going to sing a song, but I'm going to put together a whole group of guys in my region, and we're going to develop a little company, a little clique, and then we're going to create this clothing label. And Mr. Ralph Lauren, I'm going to take about 30% of your market share and make you buy this clothing label from me, or I'm going to connect it or advertise for other companies and have you buy this market share from me. So it's an economics lesson to me. And my question is, why is it that we can't see all of these wonderful things that are happening within the hip-hop industry, but all we can really see are the negative stereotypes? Why is it that perhaps even we as the consumers of hip-hop culture can't really celebrate and talk about those? Because I think one of the things I've noticed today is that we've been in defense of hip-hop, but it hasn't been our instinct to see all of these wonderful things that are happening. So could someone just comment on that?
Well, I think that obviously, if there, to address your question as to why, if a hit dog will holler. By that I mean, if people are having a knee-jerk reaction to something, it is obviously something that is affecting them to that point. We talked about earlier sensationalism. You say, well, that the aspect that you're talking about in terms of the economics being a positive aspect of this, obviously, if it's not being promoted, it's not being pushed, it's not being something that is in the forefront, it is not something that is generating a huge amount of money from the masses, it's not going to be on the front burner. I think that the passion that you speak with, that you are the person to go forth and set into motion the alternative aspect of representing the culture of hip-hop. You have the vision. You are passionate. It's evident. Don't wait. Just as you're doing in this forum, you start the movement of projecting that there is an alternative to it, so that maybe that it is something that then is filtered into, and someone else will go, well, wait a minute, maybe that's profitable, and now we'll talk about that. you know, over the killing and so forth and so on. I think it really basically to address why it's not the most evident thing is because obviously it is not that which is promoted the most. It is not that which is seen as being one that brings the most profit to those that are behind those artists. I'll give you a case point, an example of what I'm talking about. In African American groups were not considered to do big merchandising business as they would go out on tour.
Right.
So that was not a clause in their contract as to where the white groups would sell T-shirts and hats and things that it was in there. Okay? Not until Maurice came along and said, wait a minute, we're going to put this in that. And now it changes the face of how, what the gross shares are in terms of the money coming into those groups. Okay? Because Boyz II Men can sell this. They can sell this. This group can sell this. This group, but it wasn't a part of our contract. That's why I started this discussion off with my input of talking about when you deal with the African American artist experience, that it is not. It really is intrinsically connected to the political aspect of our mainstay in this country. So that now that we are profitable, you know, we are buying, we are a large consumer and we're buying stuff of our own, that this has become a culture, and in Japan and in India, it is now the thing, you know, the style of dress, the means by which one represents themselves is what those cultures are adopting. It brings in a greater sense of revenue, which ultimately I think is what we keep coming back to, which is what the bottom line is. I think Mr. Spikes referenced that. So if the passion that I hear you speak with is that strong, then I would respectfully suggest that you be the one to take that banner up and somehow bring that to the fore so that that is inclusive. Because the simple answer to it, and you know, as simple as we could get, is that it's probably not being promoted and we're not seeing it because it is not in the forefront, because right now it is not that which is generating the most dollars. Obviously, the sensationalism of the music and the reaction to the music is what brings about the controversy and therefore represents that which is the easiest to capitalize on.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Marvin Pittman. I'm a junior at the college, and when we're talking here about social responsibility, it makes me think that we've been talking a lot sort of about the superstars and the people that you see on the TV shows and you hear on the radio or you see on the internet and whatnot. But when I think of a lot of the artists that I have known, they've been people that have been in communities. They have been, namely, educators. And I was wondering if any of you had any comments on artists as educators and whether you can have that idea of a smaller community of where you live up against this giant system of media and dollars and superstars that throw themselves at you, as we've been talking about here.
I feel there's a balance between you people, everybody in here as well as around the world, using their common sense to learn to balance that. Okay, I want to be entertained at one point, but I want to learn at another point. So you got to learn not to emphasize everything in one place. Spend time, go to the side and look for what you just stated to be learning, to see what is it that they can provide for you. The sad part about it, that what we keep on saying, the media program the audience so much that they steer you away from you to learn, or they just think about just to entertain. So you have to be, as an individual, to get away from that and open your mind to see, do you want one or the other or both?
Also, as an artist, and you, or at least as a movie maker, you think of an audience of one. You want to reach one person. You want to change one life, not unlike an educator. And your audience begins with your community of friends, your community of family, somebody in that community you want to please or you want to reach, and you make your art. Your point is great in the way you describe the other part of the world that we're talking about, because you don't want less people to be reached. You want as many people to be reached as possible. The trouble with movies and with music is if you are actually reaching all these people and earning a living at it, suddenly a lot of money has been made. Folk buying $9 for a movie ticket. You know, I was at my family's house and I brought a bottle of wine to my cousin Bennett's house and they started to complain about the price of tickets. For a second, I was angry. I said, "Why are you complaining about the price of tickets? If tickets weren't that high, I wouldn't have been able to afford this bottle of wine that you're drinking right now." But it scared me because they do throw it at you. They do throw it at you, and I'm looking for a formula. I know a lot of directors and a lot of musicians that I know are looking for a formula to keep with that simple ideal as reaching one or two people, and then see whatever happens, and not letting all that stuff swarm around you. But it comes. It comes.
Well, I think that it's pretty clear that there's a lot of misunderstanding around social consciousness and entertainment, and an excellent example being hip-hop music turning into hip-hop culture, turning into black culture from the media standpoint. And I think there's some serious repercussions because of those misunderstandings. And I think that in a lot of ways that we can accept that those misunderstandings exist, and that for a lot of people, hip-hop music means black culture, and that I guess what I'm wondering is, what does that mean for us as a community who is upset about these misunderstandings and sees the bad things that come out of them? What do we try to do? What can we do? Do we change the misunderstandings? Do we change the music? I don't think we should change the music. So I pose this to the panel. What are our options now? Stacy, I don't know if you wanted to address that, but.
Yeah, I like what the gentleman had asked about, you know, the entrepreneurship of people. And I'm going to tell you the exact reason why I started Urban World. I worked in the music industry before, and when I moved over into movies and I was at Miramax, it was kind of the end of the gang movies and the Boys in the Hood and those things, and you kind of had soul food and a couple of things starting to come up. And I had moved from LA to New York. And in LA, you get in your car, you do your thing, and maybe the cops will pull you over every now and then. Well, in New York, you go and raise your hand and cabbies don't pick you up. And you get the understanding that you're black real quick. And when they drive by you, they let you know, I'm not picking you up because you might rob me, you might kill me, you might do whatever you're gonna do to me, you're not gonna pay your fare, and maybe you don't have any money. And is that real or not real? Now, most of the cabbies that would pass me up, I probably could have bought their cab and paid cash for it. But it came to the point that I had to throw my backpack in front of a cab to get him to stop, and then I get in the cab and he says, "Show me your money," before he's gonna take me someplace. Now, I've never robbed anybody. I've never owned a gun. I've never done any of the things that they would probably assume that I'm gonna do. So how did this person who's never met me, how did that person get to that point? And I knew in the position I sat in that I have to make a difference, however small in what I thought my industry was doing to promote the image, because I was being affected by the same image that I was helping to put out there. So I think that's where the point comes to, we're the problem. The media isn't separate from it. I'm the media. I'm responsible for that. Also, when you get into an elevator, If you clutch your purse a little differently, you're responsible. If you get in an elevator with someone black and you wait for them to press the floor before you press the floor, you're responsible. Because we have a perceived stereotype of how we treat people. And it's not the big things. It's these really little subtle things that people do that make you feel your presence, that makes you pissed off. And you know what it did? What did it do? It created the baby faces. It created Puffy. It created Russell Simmons. It created Berry Gordy. It created me because people treated me a certain way. So it made me want to be, you know, a 30-year-old CEO of what we're trying to make the only black studio that's ever existed. So in some ways, I'm happy about it because if everybody treated me great and did all of those things, maybe Urban World wouldn't exist, or we wouldn't be trying to release The Visit, and it would just get thrown out there like everything else. So I don't know if I answered your question, but there you go.
And you know, I'm afraid we're going to have to cut it short here now. I've gotten the magic slip that said we're supposed to end. But it's only a partial ending because there's going to be a reception upstairs at the Fainsod room on the 3rd floor. And you're all invited to come up and probably have more informal conversations with our wonderful guests. And I'd like you to thank them all for being with us today. This was easy.